Hi folks, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to look at an interview that was done by Duffy, who's a real pastor, and he was interviewing Wolfie, who's supposed to be a real pilot. So Wolfie's going to present the evidence. Right? The evidence that he produces must prove that aeroplanes fly over a rotating globe Earth. Now, in Wolfie's replies and in his evidence, he never discusses the Earth's rotation. But that's a problem, because if the Earth's a globe and an aeroplane is flying around the globe, you need to explain how an aeroplane keeps its coordination, how it can fly and land and take off on a spinning globe. So he doesn't discuss the Earth's rotation at all. So he has a problem. Why not? Because the Earth is not just a ball that's just sitting on a table. It must spin. And if an aeroplane is flying around that ball, the aeroplane has to deal with the issues that come up with the Earth's rotation. So from the get-go, we see that the evidence that Wolfie is producing is a huge problem. So let's get onto it and let's see what they say.
Issues. And my goal in this is to completely refute all of the things that flat earthers say in regards to aviation by actually talking to a real pilot. Now, for the record, I tried to find a flat earth pilot to join us for this interview, and I couldn't.
For the record, there are pilots that confirm that the Earth is flat and that it's not rotating. Now, Duffy has been on record as saying that there isn't a problem if you lie and deceive people. He's on record as saying that. So should we be surprised that people with integrity won't be interviewed by him when he's deliberately said that he can lie and twist things and manipulate the data and there's nothing wrong with it? Because only a fool would go on an interview with him. He's already said on record that there's nothing wrong with it. So anybody with any wisdom wouldn't be involved with him. So how do we deal with Wolfie and his evidence? So we can take Wolfie's evidence, we can add the Earth's rotation. Then we can also ask the question, is the evidence logical? Now, you don't need to be a pilot. If things don't make sense or they don't add up, right, then there's a problem. And then does he contradict himself? So I'm going to show you where the evidence that he supplies doesn't add up, and you don't need to be a pilot to see that it doesn't add up. Right? I'm going to show you how he contradicts himself continually. Right? So either he's a fool or a liar and a fool. I would take the latter. He's a liar and a fool, and I'm going to prove it to you. Right. So a bit about myself. Right. I'm not a pilot, but I was an instructor in the military for a few years. I was involved in active duty. Right. So you need to understand how a map works, where the location, where your target area is, the distance that's involved, because all of these things are going to affect your expectations of what you're expecting to accomplish through your strike, whether it's through artillery or through an aircraft. So in none of these do you, when you're calling in a strike, take into calculation the Earth's rotation or the curve of the Earth. Right, so if you're calling in an airstrike, that airplane can come from another country. His altitude is important because it has to match your altitude. Right, it's just common sense. His heading, his location and your location, you need to understand how this works. The pilot will come in, do his business and leave. Now the same applies to civilian aircraft. An air traffic controller has to control the traffic that's flying over continent, vast distances. The same data, same altitude, same coordinates must apply to everybody on that level field. That air traffic controller, the altitude that He understands, no matter how far away that aeroplane is from him, all of these three aeroplanes, they're regarding the same level, same altitude. The data applies to all three of them the same altitude and distance, right? Makes sense to all three of them because there is no curve.
Hey everyone, this is super exciting. I am bringing you today a real pilot to talk about the Earth and aviation and everything associated with it. Now, for those of you that have been involved in this flat Earth versus...
Right, so what we're going to do with Wolfie's evidence, we're going to add the Earth's rotation. Wolfie doesn't include it, but he should, because the Earth's not just a ball that's standing there, it's rotating, it's spinning. Is the evidence logical? Right? And does he contradict himself? So let's get on with it. In this interview, Wolfie was jumping backwards and forwards, so it was a bit difficult to fit the information together. So I think it was done deliberately. So what we're going to do is just cut out some of the information and put it together so that it makes sense. So let's listen to when Wolfie was flying from Australia to San Diego or Brazil. So I'm not sure because he spoke about both of them on the same flight and referred to different destinations.
And I believe you were in Brazil. Tell us that story.
That's correct. And the irony of when I encountered flat earthers, it was halfway through a circumnavigation of the globe. We had flown from Sydney to Christchurch in New Zealand, and then across to Argentina and up to Brazil for the Olympic Games.
So he said, we flew. Means that he's not the pilot, because he would have said, I flew. Right? So we need to make the distinction. What is Wolfie actually talking about here? What is his participation in all of this?
And on the trip back from Brazil, we went to Cape Town, Africa, and then we went across to Perth and back to Sydney. And
he flew from Sydney, Christchurch, he went north. From Christchurch, right, the North Island, he flew over to San Diego, then up to Brazil. So it's important, look at the direction that he's flying in. When he returned, he flew in the same direction, Brazil, Oliver Tambo Airport, South Africa, right, and then back to Perth, Australia, and then back down to Sydney. So it's all in the same direction. Why is this important? Remember, we have to add the Earth's rotation in it to test if what Wolfie is saying is actually the truth. And does it add up? So, if Wolfie's flying from Sydney, he would have to fly around the Earth. If it's a 16-hour flight, he would have to circumnavigate the entire Earth just to get from Australia to Chile, San Diego. So what's the problem here? Well, there is no aeroplane that can fly that distance. Right? There is no aeroplane that can fly that fast. Because remember, if the Earth's rotation, let's just assume it's 1,000 kilometers an hour, because he's not at the equator. So let's assume 1,000 kilometers an hour. He would have to fly faster than that to catch up within his 16-hour flight. So you're talking about speeds that are over 2,000 kilometers an hour. Is there a civilian airplane that can do that speed? No, there is not. Nowhere near that. Not even 1,000 kilometers, right? So add the Earth's rotation. Is the evidence logical? No. Does he contradict himself? Yes. There's a problem with his information. So let's look at the flight back. If he's flying from South America, he flies to South Africa, the same applies. Why would you do this? Then he's got to fly around to Australia. Same situation. Right? So now here's the question. Why not fly the opposite direction? When you're flying from Brazil, fly the opposite direction, go to New Zealand, because of the Earth's a ball. It wouldn't make any difference, buddy. In fact, it would be a shorter distance to do that because of the Earth's rotation. Just go in the opposite direction you'd fly for less time, save money, save fuel, time, whatever. He doesn't do this. So remember, if the Earth's a ball, a globe, which they're saying it is, then it must rotate. So from the northern hemisphere it would look like this, and from the southern hemisphere it would look like that. So does the information, the evidence he provides, does it add up? No, it doesn't. So for argument's sake, let's look at this on a flat Earth map. Right, he flies from Sydney to North Island in New Zealand. Then he heads up and he lands in Santiago, or he lands in Argentina, right, just past Chile, and then he flies up to Brazil. Then on his way back, he flies to South Africa, then across to Perth. It makes perfect sense. So I'm showing you on a flat Earth map that it makes sense on a flat Earth map, because that flat Earth map isn't turning. It's not moving. So Wolfie needs to explain how an aeroplane can fly with the Earth's rotation and spin, and fly against the Earth's rotation and spin in the same allotted time. But with a globe, they'd be flying at different speeds, different distances, different times. It's logical. Does Wolfie acknowledge this, that in his flight training they handle this information? Our pilots taught us how to deal with the Earth's spin, the difference in times and in speeds? No, they are not. So he's lying to you. Right? So, if the evidence does not add up, then Duffy is a snake and Wolfie is a wolf. Right? This is what it is. And the evidence is not adding up, and we've just got started.
Obviously from Australia.
Yes.
So you're intimately familiar with the Southern Hemisphere. The Southern Hemisphere, in my mind, ever since I got into this whole flat Earth debate, was the key to settling the debate and it completely ending flat Earth.
Yes.
Because the Southern Hemisphere on a globe, south of the equator, everything gets closer and closer together.
Yes.
But on a flat Earth, everything gets further and further apart. And so when we get to the Southern Hemisphere,
Yes.
and we have flights that are going to go from, say, South America all the way to Australia, they're going to follow what we're talking about here, which is the Great Circle Route, which is the shortest distance between 2 points on a sphere.
Correct.
And when you get really far south, you're actually going to find that you're going to head in a southerly direction toward Antarctica, and then kind of come back up north to, say, go from Santiago to Sydney.
Yes.
And so flat earthers for years, they first denied that these flights existed.
Yes.
How many times did you hear that?
All the time.
Those flights, right, we'll get to the flights that they denied that exist. Wolfie's not being 100% honest here, right? So Duffy was talking about the distances. Well, that changes if the Earth's rotating. So his information, he conveniently leaves out the important information. You have to include the Earth's rotation, and when you do, what Wolfie and Duffy are saying is utter garbage. There is no plane that can fly at that speed, at that distance, in that time. Does not exist. So, yes, those flights on a rotating Earth do not exist. They cannot exist, and it's stupid. So, if an aeroplane flies in a straight line, it must be flying over a flat surface. Now, if I rotate that map, that aeroplane can't rotate with a map. That means for every half rotation that map does, the pilot has to counter that rotation. If he's going from A to B, does a pilot who flies from one end of the Earth to the other end of the Earth, he would need to rotate his plane 180 degrees. Does he do that? No. Does Wolfie deal with this? No. So if this is this aeroplane's, that's his angle to the rotation of that Earth. Look at that aeroplane's angle to that ball. When he gets to the other end, he has to rotate his plane. Otherwise, he's flying in the wrong direction, dumbass. Do they deal with that information? No, and it's simple information. No, they don't. Now, just to show you that both Duffy and Wolfie, you got two idiots, and together they're zombies. You would have to plan your landing at your destination exactly at the right time as Santiago goes by. If you're flying from Australia to San Diego, the Earth's rotating, would you just automatically land in San Diego to match the Earth's rotation? No. It's not possible. Right? Do you understand the issue? Look, here's a guy, he's going to throw his ball into the basket. You say, okay, well, that's his arc. He can do it, right? People do it. Now, if I rotate that basketball court, it changes everything. 180 degrees. That basketball would have to land in that basket at the right time that basket is coming by for the ball to land in the basket. It's just common sense. Right? So when they say airplanes fly over rotating globe Earth, right? It's either because they're stupid or they're liars or both. Right? Remember we're talking about Wolfie's evidence. Dumbass. So here's the problem. The wolf and the snake have gone sheep hunting. Now, it's up to you. Right? If they catch you because you're not thinking, you have to accept at least 50% of the responsibility on yourself, on your own head, because you're too dumbass lazy to check the information. You got a brain, you don't want to use it, so when shit happens to you, you want to blame the other person. And so you go through your whole life being abused and trampled on and keep blaming other person because you don't want to man up and do your homework. Right? As long as you go through life like that, you will be taken advantage of. You need to understand that. So, do your homework. Right, so, if a wolf invites you over for lunch, there's the menu. Right? Where's the meat? Well, dumbass, you the meat. Do you think a wolf becomes your friend and takes you home because he's going to feed you? No, you're going to feed him. You are the meal. They're not your friend. Right? He's not your friend. Wake up. So, Wolfie, the wolf man, the sheep eater. Add the Earth's rotation. Is the evidence logical? Does he contradict himself? So let's get on with it.
And I got called a liar many, many times. The amount of times that flat earthers would say, you're not a real pilot, you're a liar, you're an agent. It was just comical. It was like a whole new experience of how people treat you when you talk to them, and it was like complete disbelief, you know. And for me, it was very easy to prove that I was a pilot. Show footage from the aircraft, show footage of myself, you know. So it was something that came later on my channel, and
so he shows you this photograph, the heads-up display. Right? Where's the horizon? It's below the HUD. Right? You see the problem? Where's the camera pointing? It's pointing up. At the same time, film the attitude indicator. What's the problem? That's just common sense. Look, his camera's pointing up. Look at the visual. His camera's pointing up towards the cockpit. That means because the HUD display is closer to the camera lens, right? If he leveled his camera out, the HUD display would line up with the horizon because the Earth's flat. So he's being a sneaky little shitbag. Because he's a dishonest scumbag. So did these pilots get it wrong? There's a horizon in front of them. Their attitude indicator shows that the horizon is where it should be. But not according to Wolfie.
And it was while we were sitting in Brazil for 3 weeks that I first saw flat earthers on YouTube. And probably wouldn't have given it much thought, except some of the videos were popping up were related to aviation, and everything I saw was completely wrong. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. The first video I saw was from Eric Dubay, and it was talking about the horizon always rising to eye level. Now, in the type of aircraft that I fly, we're at very high altitudes. We go up to 45,000 feet and above, and we're actually trained to identify that the horizon will be below horizontal. It's in the head-up display. It's actually in the flight manual of the aircraft that states this is due to the curvature of the Earth. So I started.
Right, so is the evidence logical? Does he contradict himself? How can you test this? Well, you don't need to be a pilot. You can be a passenger, for goodness sake. When you on an aeroplane, what is your personal experience? The horizon is at your eye level, the aeroplane takes off, right? When the aeroplane levels out, the horizon is where at your eye level. Can the pilot see the horizon at a different level? No, because you're on the same floor. Right? That aeroplane turns in all the different headings, it's still level. The aeroplane raises its altitude, levels out, the horizon still at your eye level. Right. So from when the pilot is on the ground, the airplane is on the ground, the horizon is in front of you, and as he flies, no matter how high he flies or low he flies, the horizon is always at his eye level. So if it's curved, like he's saying, when you raise your altitude, what is that pilot leveling out to? What? He has to go back to his original level that was when he was on the runway. Because what is he leveling out to? If he raises his altitude, right, and he changes a few degrees to his left or to right, what now is he going to level out to? What horizon? Where is he going to get that information from? Where does that information come from? Is it just magically going to just pop out of his computer?
Bay, and it was talking about the horizon always rising to eye level. Now, in the type of aircraft that I fly, we're at very high altitudes. We go up to 45,000 feet and above, and we're actually trained to identify that the horizon will be below horizontal. It's in the head-up display. It's actually in the flight manual of the aircraft that states this is due to the curvature of the Earth. So I started...
All right, so Wolfie's saying that he flies higher than most as a pilot. He flies an Airbus. That's what he's saying. Now, is that true? I don't know. But he's a dumbass, and I wouldn't allow this idiot to ride a bicycle, never mind a flippin' flying aeroplane. Right? So, his attitude indicator is related to his altitude above the ground. That information is constant for both, for the horizon and for his aeroplane. But if he's flying over a curve, the further away the horizon is, the higher the altitude must be. So he cannot be flying over a curve, because otherwise his attitude indicator and his altitude indicator would be out of sync. So he's talking nonsense.
Comes to flat earthers and aviation. And this huge misunderstanding leads to things like them thinking taking a spirit level on a plane would somehow settle this debate over flat earth and globe. What is this misunderstanding that they have causing them to come up with these bizarre experiments?
It comes down to one thing. They do not understand how up and down works on a globe. If you could pass me that globe, I can do a quick demonstration. It seems...
Right, so now Wolfie is going to show you how upside down is the same as right side up. Really? So down to the ground and forward is also down around the ball. Who's actually confused here? Right. Forward is the direction that one is facing or traveling. Where? Towards the front of the aeroplane. Right? It was a dumbass. Right? When you're reading a book and it says they went up and they went down, for example, the Bible says Jesus went up to heaven and Satan was cast down to earth. They came from the same place. Well, how does that work on a ball? If God's throne is the most high, above everything else, but you're on a ball earth, right? And if you're in Australia, well, then God's throne is beneath your feet. And if Satan was thrown down to earth, right, then Satan is still above God from your perspective. So he's a moron. He's an idiot.
Means that there are some, and I never say all, I always say some flat earthers who believe that south is down, okay? But on the globe, down is towards the center of the globe. So my finger is showing the direction of down at various points on the globe. And not understanding this, and not understanding that if you have a direction of down, you have 90 degrees to that, that's horizontal. So that's how aircraft instruments define horizontal by knowing the direction of down and going 90 degrees to that. That's horizontal. So when we talk about pitch attitude, we'll come back to that later, the horizontal that they're referring to is 90 degrees to down. And that.
Right, so what he's describing doesn't exclude a flat earth, right? Forward, down, up, right? It doesn't exclude the flat earth. But there's a problem. So we're going to test this nonsense about up and down, what he's saying. Up and down makes sense on a flat earth. They don't make sense on a globe. Because remember, he's saying that forward must also be down, because you're going forward, down around the ball. Now, think about it. This aeroplane, this is his flight path around the rotation of the Earth. So this aeroplane is flying. Where's up and where's down? Well, if what Wolfe is saying, it's in relation to the center of the Earth. So is this aeroplane flying down? No, as he flies around the Earth, he's got to keep turning left. Right? So it would depend on where the plane is flying, on his flight path. If this aeroplane is flying around the ball at this angle, which is different, is not 90 degrees to the Earth's rotation axis, well then up and down must flip over. Up becomes down, and down becomes up. It's not the same for both. He's trying to convince you that it's all the same, one size fits all. No, it doesn't. He's lying to you. Right, so there are three aeroplanes. This is their flight path around the Earth, right? The Earth's axis of rotation. Is forward the same for both of them? No, they're both flying at different angles. They both have to turn to their left at different degrees to their left. Right. So is their angle to the center of the Earth the same for each one? No, they're all different. So it would depend on your flight path around the axis rotation of the Earth. So what Wolfe is saying is just utter garbage, and he's a fool and a liar.
On the Earth.
Now, I remember Rob Skiba, before he passed away, was talking about taking a spirit level onto a plane. Probably most famously, D. Marble, a flat earther,
Yes.
Not only took a spirit level on a plane, but also filmed it.
Yes.
And they seemed to think that this shows that we don't live on a globe and that the Earth is flat. The biggest misunderstanding that I see on this particular spirit level thing is in their assumption, based on where you start on the globe, the spirit level would maybe look like this.
Yeah.
If you started here, and then as you traveled along the globe, it would change. So, but what they're not acknowledging is that no matter where you are on the globe, you're going to start here.
Yes.
And so let's demonstrate that here. I'll let you hold this.
The difference is, if I can just show that, flat earthers think this should happen.
Yes.
But what actually happens if you hold the spirit level is this. So the spirit level is always at the position of up, because up is opposite to down, and down is always towards the center of the globe.
Yes.
I mean, can anybody in their right mind think that this is actually legit? The airplane has to fly around the curve of the ball. So what is his nonsense? He's a complete moron. The airplane flies around the curve of the ball. Now all of a sudden the spirit level stays straight and the earth turns. That's his answer for his bullshit. Seriously? Do I have to explain to you and show you that what he's doing is just so insanely stupid? So, add the Earth's rotation. Is the evidence logical? Does he contradict himself? So, does he contradict himself? Let's see.
Now, one of the things that I hear most frequently from flat earthers is something about pitch data.
Yes.
And they like to bring up pitch data, which I think is just another misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
And they seem to think that the pitch data is going to drastically and radically change throughout a flight around the globe. Explain why that's not the case.
It's the same fundamental problem of not understanding that down changes direction as you follow the globe. And because down is changing direction, so is horizontal. Again, if we have the globe. So if we look at the globe here, horizontal is there, but if we move to this part of the Earth, horizontal is like that. Now, pitch data is being measured from horizontal at the location of the aircraft. And what flat earthers believe, or what some of them claim, is that this is the only horizontal there is. And so that as the plane goes around, it should be pitching down from this horizontal. What they're not realizing is that the horizontal is changing with the curvature of the Earth. 1 degree for every 60 nautical miles. Pitch data is measured from the horizontal at the aeroplane. Yeah.
Now, I brought along...
What a dumbass. He just contradicts himself. He's too stupid to realize. He contradicts himself within a few seconds with his stupid spinning ball. Alright, so remember, if the evidence does not add up, Duffy's a snake and Wolf is a wolf. It's just as simple as that.
So the first thing I want to cover is, I hear this all the time. Flat earthers claim that pilots are trained on a flat earth and not a globe, but I'm guessing nothing could be further from the truth.
That is completely incorrect. You know, I can remember very clearly going to my pilot theory courses in Sydney, Australia in the 80s, and we had a globe in the classroom.
Okay, so he's talking about GPS, right? So he had GPS, right, before it was actually put in other aircraft, right? When Wolfie was flying his shitty bang bang, he was doing his pilot training in his shitty bang bang. He had GPS in it before other people had GPS in their aeroplanes, right? So when he went into the classroom, ooh, wow, they're a globe, right? So they ran out of funds, didn't have enough money, so that all pilots couldn't buy a plastic globe. They had one in the classroom, right? And they all did this training, right, off this globe. Really? Does anybody actually believe the shit he's talking? Because if you do, sorry for you, but you're a dumbass.
And all our textbooks show the globe, the great circles, the calculations are based on spherical math for a globe Earth. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous to claim that pilots are trained for a flat Earth. That has never crossed my mind or crossed my path in my 40 plus years of aviation.
I wouldn't brag about that, buddy. Very little has crossed this man's mind, because he's an idiot, right? So, he's never wondered, how can you set your destination direction if you're flying from Chile to Australia? Right. As a pilot, he's never thought about it. Your coordinates will be based on your position and destination by the Earth's rotation, which would change based on what time it is and how fast or slow you were flying. Your horizon, right, your attitude would change depending on your path around this Earth's rotation axis. It would constantly change. So how do you set your destination direction? Right? If your destination is 1,000 kilometers under your feet, where are you flying to? You can't set a destination that's below you. Based on what? Maybe you can if you're flying a shitty bang bang. So how did these guys do it? Right? What training manuals did they have? Because can a zeppelin, right, works on buoyancy? There were pilots that flew zeppelin. Explain what Wolfie was saying, how it works on a zeppelin. Right? How does a zeppelin works on buoyancy? How does a zeppelin work? A zeppelin could turn on a tight axis. It's not possible for a zeppelin to fly at an angle. That's what he's saying happens to an aeroplane. Remember, the angle must be 90 degrees to the surface of the Earth. Right? But then if the zeppelin turns to its left, what's the problem? No, when the Zeppelin rotated, it was always level with the Earth, so the Zeppelin wasn't flying over a ball. Right? Look at the distances these Zeppelins used to fly at. You see the problem? If the Earth's rotating, that Zeppelin can't rotate with the Earth. So for every 360-degree rotation, if it takes that pilot 2 days or 3 days to do that one long leg, he'd have to rotate his Zeppelin in the opposite direction so that it can fly in the right direction. How does a Zeppelin fly in the right direction if the Earth's rotating? It doesn't add up. It's just simply not freaking possible. And these were pilots that flew the Zeppelin, right? But according to them, they were flying around a spinning ball. So how did they navigate? Remember, if Wolfie is saying that all pilots fly the same, the information and the data must be the same for all pilots in the past and in the future. It doesn't add up. So what do we see? That a Zeppelin pilot would head along a certain heading. He would fly, because the Earth's not spinning, along that same heading in a flippin' straight line. He would change his heading to a new heading, fly that distance, and he flew for days. Right. And then they would fly along the next heading. So if you look at for the maximum longest run, it was for kilometers, thousands of kilometers, man. So Wolf is talking absolute nonsense. Remember, the information must be the same for everybody. So you think it's just a coincidence, right? That the Zeppelins fell like lead, or they deliberately sabotaged. There's a problem. It was a brilliant form of transportation. Because Zeppelins proved that you're not flying over a spinning ball Earth. And if they were still around and people flew in them, they'd be laughing at you if you said you lived on a spinning ball. So of course, Zeppelins had to go. Because it didn't fit the narrative, the bullshit that they want to come out with. That you're living on a spinning ball.
So I'm guessing if we were to look in your flight manuals, in your training manuals, in your FAA documents,
Absolutely.
They're going to talk about the globe.
Absolutely. And one document I have on my channel it's an FAA order that specifically relates to how they design the instrument approaches that are used for.
Gee, one document. But bro, seriously, you should have books. Books, tons of books, pages and pages. Show us the pages. Look at one document, right, that discusses how an airplane can fly around a curve and land on a curve. Show us the document that shows how an airplane can land on a rotating Earth. Just show everybody. Stop talking shit and show everybody.
Pilots in bad weather. And there's two basic types. There's one type which is following a beam to the ground. That is actually a straight line from the ground. But there's another one called a Barrow VNAV, which is actually following a GPS lateral path and an altitude based on the altimeter on the aircraft.
Okay, so if an airplane takes off, right, he gets to his altitude, right, then he lands, right. That's what Wolf is saying. He lands according to that beam around the curve. But explain how this works with his demonstration. Because we know how airplanes fly on his shitty bang bang. How does an airplane take off? Right, because remember, how does when an airplane takes off and lands, how does that tie into the information he gave you earlier? It doesn't. It's a contradiction. The plane that he flies is a shitty bang bang.
And also shows you the calculation they use and the radius of the Earth used in their calculation. So you cannot deny the fact that the FAA absolutely factors in curvature when they're designing these approaches.
Seriously? Does it apply to these pilots who are going to land on a aircraft carrier, right? That's moving. Seriously. Do they factor in the rotation of the Earth? No, they don't. Not once. Never. Are these pilots flying at the same angle? Right. Show me in your flight manuals that a person at the equator would be flying simply down, but if he moves further south, he would have to start turning right, not down. Down now becomes right. And it can still maintain a 90-degree angle to that surface of that ball as he's flying and turning right. And of course, if he's in the north, it's the other angle, the other way. Show me this, because this is not possible. It's simply not possible. There cannot be one great circle route. You would require hundreds of circle routes, each with its own formula addressing the Earth's rotation and your flight path east and west and north and south in relation to the axis rotation of the Earth. It's just simply bullshit, that is what he's saying. So, add the Earth's rotation is a liar. Is the evidence logical? No. Does he contradict himself? Yes. So Wolf is a liar.
It's all based on the WGS84 spheroid, which is the Earth. It's the same database, the same datum that we use in our aviation apps, in all the instrument approach charts, in the flight management system in the aircraft.
And if the Earth is rotating?
Horizontal is there, but if we move to this part of the Earth, horizontal is like that. Now, pitch data is being measured from horizontal at the location of the aircraft. And what flat earthers believe, or what some of them claim, is that this is the only horizontal there is. And so that as the plane goes around, it should be pitching down from this horizontal. What they're not realizing is that the horizontal is changing with the curvature of the Earth.
But yeah, he just said that it doesn't change. He says, no, it doesn't do that. It stays level. Right? Do you understand? The man's an idiot. He's not fit to ride a bicycle, never mind fly an aeroplane. So if he's a pilot, you get on with him, fly with him. Good luck with that. I would never go near this man, because he's a moron.
100% true.
Let's talk about flight planning. This is a big one because the flight paths on a globe versus a flat Earth would be drastically different.
Absolutely.
Planes need to get to their location. They need to get there in as short of a time as safely possible.
Yes.
They need to make sure they have enough fuel. And no one's going to fly on a commercial airline that is getting to locations in much longer times than other airlines.
Correct.
So everyone...
Correct. So the Earth can't be spinning. Right? Because if it was, right, the very thing that you spoke about contradicts what he said. So he's contradicting himself. Right. So the shortest route has to be around 90 degrees to the axis rotation of the Earth. Right. Whatever the height is from the equator up, right, that has to be the shortest route to the circumference of your ball. You can't deviate from that, because now you're flying unnecessarily, wasting fuel, time and money.
Using the same flight planning.
Yes.
Is flight planning done on a globe or a flat Earth?
It's absolutely done on a globe. I've got my app here, which is what I use in the aircraft all the time. And you can see very clearly that it's a globe. We put our flight plans on that. We can overlay the instrument approach charts. We can pan around. You know.
Well, I see a flat tablet, dumbass. You see, what is he deliberately leaving out? What information is he not telling you? What is he leaving out? Is that I can take a flat map, I can put it on a ball, right? The grid coordinates, the grid coordinates stay the same. So the ball is just an illusion. I can take this flat map, put it on a ball, the grid coordinates stay the same. It doesn't mean that the map is a ball. It's just an illusion. It's just a cheap trick. Which aeroplane here is flying the shortest distance? The one going around the curve or the one flying in a straight line? And if it's rotating, you just end up going back in the wrong direction where you came from.
On a globe, and if we can bring up the globe, I'll show you something that might make it a bit more intuitive. If you pick any two locations on the globe, let's say we were here and we wanted to go to here, how you find the shortest route is you would put a piece of string between 2 points and you would pull it as tight as possible, and it will then naturally fall across the great circle track. And you can do that between any 2 points on a globe. A bit of string here and a bit of string here, pull it tight, and that will then show you the great circle path.
Right. That a boy. This, this guy studied for nothing. All he needed was a ball, some tape, and a piece of string. Seriously?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the great circle route is what is used by pilots to get from
Always.
point A to point B.
Always, yeah.
And let's talk about the
Really? That circle route would change depending on the Earth's rotation, dumbass.
south of the equator, everything gets closer and closer together.
Yes.
But on a flat Earth, everything gets further and further apart. And so when we get to the Southern Hemisphere,
Yes.
and we have flights that are going to go from, say, South America all the way to Australia, they're going to follow what we're talking about here, which is the Great Circle Route, which is the shortest distance between 2 points on a sphere.
Correct.
And when you get really far south, you're actually going to find that you're going to head in a southerly direction toward Antarctica, and then kind of come back up north to, say, go from Santiago to Sydney.
Yes.
And so flat earthers for years.
So Wolf is just contradicting himself. Remember with his dumbass piece of string? The shortest distance would be along that the rotation of the Earth's axis, right? 90 degrees to that, laterally. Right? Now he's just, as Duffy's contradicting him, and he just says yes. So any aeroplane that goes north or south that deviates from that is flying in that direction unnecessarily, because you just have to simply fly back from where you came from, because the Earth's rotating. You're wasting time, fuel, money, because you could have just flown in the opposite direction, right, and saved yourself a lot of time and money. So when they speak, is what they're saying, does it add up? No, it doesn't. They're deliberately lying to you.
They first denied that these flights existed.
Yes.
How many times did you hear that?
All the time. And the funniest part is I heard that within a week of having just done one, you know, having flown from, where were we? From Sydney, Australia. We were going to Santiago in Chile, you know, the big flight. But the aircraft I was flying at the time didn't quite have the range to make it non-stop. So we stopped in Christchurch, New Zealand to refuel.
So once again, he's misapplying and he's misrepresenting the information. So look, years ago, before flat Earth was a thing, before the spinning board Earth was a thing, I was making videos. There was very few people on the internet. So I had a channel called My Perspective. So the videos that I made, Eric Dubay used a lot of the animation in his videos. So I was making videos even before Eric Dubay was around, or any other of the flat earthers. Right. There was maybe one or two of us on the entire internet at that time discussing the issues. So I asked a question at that time, which is the longest non-stop flights? And the issue was a non-stop flight. So Wolfie said, no, well, it's not really a non-stop flight, right? They had to stop at in Christchurch in New Zealand, so it'd be at South Island. So that was the issue. So he's misrepresenting the facts, right? And so these flights were on and off. So when I checked and when I questioned it, right, I made a video, I can't remember, a long time ago, showing that, listen, there's problems if they're saying these flights exist, because I didn't see them on the internet. They weren't advertised.
But then from Christchurch, we were flying across to San Diego. Now, as it turned out, our arrival time was early in the morning. There was fog, so we ended up landing in Argentina, which was our alternate. But our flight was absolutely in the Southern Hemisphere at all times, and it went quite a way further south than the latitude of both Christchurch and San Diego.
Right, so now he's just contradicting himself again. He now is going south because that's what Wolf Duffy said. Because they have to prove that they're flying around the South Pole. Look, there is no South Pole, it doesn't exist. That's why they need this airplane to go fly around the South Pole. Remember, any deviation from that axis, rotation, 90 degrees, any deviation down, south, would be a waste of time, waste of money. Because you're flying there for nothing because you're going to have to fly all the way back up again. Then how do you land? If you're coming from that angle, how do you land in the country where you're supposed to be landing if that country is moving? How's it possible? It's not possible because they're lying to you. Right, so just think, a pilot that does aerobatics, whatever he moves, and he's different directions, different speeds, right, he loops, he can only have one horizon. His horizon in the airplane must match the horizon on the outside, so there can be no curve. It must be the same for the horizon outside and the horizon on his airplane. Think of skydivers. What do they see? Speak to skydivers. Right? I was in the military. Ask them what the experience was when you jump out of airplane. A person in a parachute will use the horizon to stabilize himself. What is up and what is down. That's always at his eye level, no matter how high he is and when he lands. And how can he land if the earth is spinning? It's just not possible. So, in his discussion, Wolfie said that, Will Duffy said that Wolfie is like an expert. Right, and that flat earthers were rejecting this expert explanation. Well, the earth is full of dead people who blindly trusted the experts. Here's Dr. Fauci, an expert. Right, he's responsible for the suffering and the death of hundreds and thousands of people. Right, but he had to be pardoned by the president. So a clown had to come by and pardon him. But look, if you're an expert, how is it that you need to be pardoned? You'd think that the idiot would get pardoned because he didn't know any better. But you have to pardon the expert. So exactly how does that work? Because if you're an expert and they have to pardon you, well then I can take your expert papers, wipe my backside with it and give it back to you because it's valueless. So you can be an expert, you can make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Small mistakes. But there are people who are deliberately lying to you and misleading you. You need to understand that there's something else going on in the world. Right, it's about control. They can't afford you to question the bullshit that they're telling you. These people need to control the populations. They need to get rid of a lot of people. That's the only way I can say it. Right? They need to reduce the world's population. So what does that mean? They need to throw out a lot of people. I don't know how to say this to make you wake up. Right? You need to understand that there's evil people that have an agenda. And Duffy and Wolfie doing the will of those people. So whether they directly belong to them, I don't know, I don't care. We all have to render account on Judgment Day. Right? And you're not going to speak your way out of this one. And no one's going to pardon you on Judgment Day. Right? Because this is manslaughter. So you can pardon people for manslaughter. Not just one or two people, but thousands. And thousands will still die and thousands are still suffering. Right? So keep in mind that there are pilots that have integrity, right, that disagree with Wolfie. So you need to choose. Use your own mind and work it out. So I want to get back to when I was in the military. Look, when I was in the military, it was a big part of me waking up. I could see that there was something seriously wrong in what was going on. And that was that normal people are good people. Generally speaking, human beings are good, decent, kind people and do the right thing. That's generally speaking. But there are those, and the government manipulates those people and employs those people. The more crooked you are, then the government's going to employ you to cause havoc, and they play both sides against each other. Right, and all you want to do is lead a simple, upright life, doing the best you can. So they cause chaos to the left and to the right. Right. So what happened in Africa, I saw it with my own eyes. At that time, I was still young. I just wondered, what is going on? Because I could see both sides were getting paid by the same organizations. Right. So, for example, one day I was speaking to this, it was a military, high-ranking official, right, but he was a priest. So I asked him, how is it that our funds that we are paying to the churches goes to the United Nations, and the money sends that United Nations to the same people that are fighting us, so that they can buy guns and bullets? So what happened to some of these countries? Right? The poor people were just being manipulated. They were told, okay, well, we're getting rid of the old world colonialists, and we're going to bring in a new world. So what stopped them from agreeing in the first place? There was no need for a war. It was that they had to put the populations under pressure so that the populations would accept the new changes. So they destabilize countries, and when they bring in these changes, the people who are suffering because of all the nonsense willingly accept the changes that they wouldn't normally accept. Right. So what happened in some of these countries, right? If I look back in history, the big white fat cats, they just put in a big black fat cat, and then the poor people are still eating and drinking empty promises. Nothing's changed. They just put in a black fat cat, took out the white fat cat. And unfortunately, the majority of the people that are suffering just are not putting two and two together, because otherwise, if they did, they wouldn't play into these people's hands. They wouldn't get involved in the crime, and they wouldn't get involved in the evil that's going on, because they're getting fueled by the media, by certain individuals, egging them on, saying this is a racial issue when it's not. It's about human suffering. Right. And it's evil people doing this. So you need to do your homework, right? They're creating the illusion of peace and justice and success. It's just an illusion. The people that you think are your friends are not your friends. It's sad to say this, but you can see the same organization, Freemasonry, throwing fire wherever they go, setting everything ablaze, throwing petrol wherever they go, right? Turning people against each other, and then feeding off that hatred and anger. So with me, I ended up becoming a Christian. I first joined a religion which was a load of nonsense, right? So don't join religions like Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and all these other. They're all part of it. It's all a lie. What is not a lie is that when Jesus Christ said, they will not follow the voice of a stranger, no one can snatch him out of my hand. So it took a while before I realized that that God is in control, that Jesus Christ is real, he's the King of the earth, he's King of kings, and that he will help you to keep your balance. Open your eyes and to understand the flat level road to go on. It's a narrow road, right? And so people like Wolfie and Duffy, they're just evil scumbags. They're not your friend. So look, I hope this video has given you pause to stop and think, and you have to pray constantly. So cheers and thanks for watching.